Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday, April 3rd, 2018 meeting of the Urban Village Development Commission. I'd like to go ahead and call this meeting to order, 7:02. Before we get into the approval of the minutes, just want to let everybody know the meeting we had a couple weeks ago covered a different application than we're seeing tonight. The continuation of that public hearing from that last meeting will happen on April 17th. Tonight's meeting will be the first of two, and the continuation of this meeting, or the second part of this meeting, will happen sometime in probably early May. So I just wanted to get everybody on the same page on that. Let's go ahead and talk about the minutes from March 20th. We were all here on that night. Did anybody have any opportunity? Did you have the opportunity to take a look at it and have any comments or anything on it?
Yeah, I have no comments.
You have no comments?
I'll look through it, no comment.
Okay. So do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve?
Yep.
And a second? Sarah?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Okay, unanimous, thank you. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the public hearing for Westridge Townhomes North Site Development Permit. I think Valerie's going to, or is it Lucy that's going to start us off?
I get to do the quasi-judicial.
Oh, right, thank you. Before you do that, I want to let everybody know that there is a sign-up sheet here. If you plan to speak this evening, we'd like to ask you to put your name and information on that sheet, and we will call you when the time comes, once we get into public comment section of the meeting.
So, good evening, Lucy Sloman, Land Development Manager. I'm going to just walk you through the quasi-judicial part of the evening. This is a site development permit. It's triggered in the urban villages. It is triggered by having a property 3 acres or more. Smaller in size than 3 acres is administrative. Your role will be decision maker. Unlike the plat where you're making a recommendation, you actually make the decision. And so that makes this a quasi-judicial matter. So you are going to be doing a planning level review on these land use actions, looking for conformance with the development agreement, the comprehensive plan, and city code where applicable. We're not asking you to review technical studies and documents because that's something that a qualified professional would do. And also architecture, materials, and colors are the purview of the Architectural Review Committee, but you're welcome to make comments. They do watch these. It does influence things that happen later on. It's helpful for all of us to hear your thoughts about that. So as a quasi-judicial matter, this is like a court. We have to not only be fair, but appear fair. So that is composed of 2 things, procedural due process and substantive due process. Procedural due process means the way how we handle the proceedings. We have to give notice. We only do things here where it's on the record, available for everyone to hear. Substantive due process is about the regulations that are the basis for making the decision. So I'd like for you to read through the questions, and then I'll ask you if you have yes or no answers. Anyone answer no? Anyone answer yes to any of them?
Number 5, I do have a home in Issaquah, Highlands, but is not near or affected by this community.
Okay. And Ben, did you have something you wanted to add? Okay. Then the other part of quasi-judicial is, as I mentioned, that all the conversation and discussion of the permit happens on the record. Has anyone talked to people outside of this setting about this permit? Does anyone object to any of the commissioners who are participating tonight? Okay. And then just, again, the difference between a preliminary plat and a site development permit. Preliminary plat is substantially about the subdivision of land into parcels, tracts, lots, and making sure that they are appropriately sized and shaped and located for the uses and requirements. It is not a review of what's on them, other than how that influences the size, the shape, the location, and then, of course, code compliance. Site development permit is about the design, so you're not only you're looking at the uses, the location, how the various elements of the proposal are designed for compliance with the code. Any questions?
No.
Okay.
Me?
You guys are getting like the full-on plat one week, SDP the next week.
Thank you for that. It's very helpful for everybody, I think. All right, Valerie Porter, welcome.
Thank you. So my name is Valerie Porter, and I'm the Associate Planner with the City's Development Services Department. I'm here to talk about the site development permit for Westridge Townhomes North that was applied for by Polygon Northwest. So the site is located in the Issaquah Highlands, close to the Grand Ridge Plaza. On the image shown, you'll see the site is highlighted in red. To the north is the Westridge Single Family Plat Project. To the south is the Townhome South Project. And to the east is the Shelter Holdings Project, or property. And you'll notice that a small section is south of Northeast Ellis, which is close to the Townhome South Project. So the project will be constructed on a vacant site that's 7.26 acres. Initially, the applicant was proposing to construct 112 attached townhomes throughout 21 buildings, but it was brought to my attention today the applicant has taken away one unit, so the new total will be 111. The applicant will speak to this a little bit later. Majority of the homes will be 3 stories and some will be 4 stories with a habitable attic. Out of the 111 homes, 10 of the homes will be designated as affordable homes. The applicant is required to design the project to the traditional townscape neighborhood type, and the project will also consist of a neighborhood park, a P-patch, and several pocket parks. So as part of the Issaquah Highlands Development Agreement, it's required to have at least 30% of the project as affordable housing units. In July 2016, the applicant requested that the Issaquah Highlands Development Agreement be amended to allow 100 transferred development rights, also known as TDRs, be moved from the WashDOT development to the entire Westridge development. The purpose of the TDRs is to transfer density from eligible sending sites to eligible receiving sites through a voluntary process. In this situation, the Westridge development is the receiving site. In June 2017, the city approved the request and established a development agreement. The applicant is required to construct 49 affordable units. The applicant has chosen to disperse these units between 2 sites. This site, 10 units will be constructed as part of this project, and 39 will be constructed on Block 4, which is highlighted in orange. So the site will be surrounded by 3 public streets and is made up of 2 character streets and several alleys. The site is bordered by Northeast Federal Drive, which is located to the north, 8th Avenue Northeast, which is to the east, and Northeast Ellis Drive, which is to the south. Ellis Drive is currently under construction and will eventually connect from 9th to High Street. And then 8th Avenue and Northeast Federal Drive will be extended as a result of this project. Both of these 2 streets straddle the property lines. So the applicant is required to construct the roads and must obtain either an access easement or an agent of authority from the property owner prior to construction. All of the streets provide 2-lane direction. 2 character streets are proposed for the project and they will be privately owned. The street locations are extensions of the character streets from the Townhome South project. Character streets are pedestrian priority streets that are constructed out of concrete and provide a continuous surface throughout the paved portion of the corridor. Vertical curbs are not used here. Instead, vertical elements such as benches, raised planters, and changes in paving materials, color, and texture will be used. Majority of the buildings in this project look onto character streets, which will provide primary building access to the units. Like the public streets, the character streets will allow for both north and southbound vehicle access and will also provide on-street parking, but only on the west side of the street will parking be permitted. Issaquah Highlands strives to be a pedestrian-oriented community. In keeping with this goal, the site provides an interconnected pedestrian circulation system made up of the feature pedestrian way trail, which is located by the green line, the neighborhood trail, which is marked by the yellow line, and several sidewalks that are lined with red. In regards to pedestrian circulation, the image shows the approximate distance between blocks. You'll notice that the horizontal distances are shorter in compared to the vertical lengths. The longest block length is approximately 345 feet and is located along 8th Avenue. A feature pedestrian way is proposed, and a feature pedestrian way is a hard surface promenade that connects to major focal points, like the neighborhood park in this project. This type of trail should be designed for pedestrians as a primary user and should not be constructed out of asphalt, but concrete and other special pavings like the example shown. This is especially important at street and alley crossings. The proposed featuring pedestrian way is located in the middle of the site and runs east to west, connecting 8th Avenue and the open space located to the west. Not only does the trail provide access through the site, but it also helps break up the long block. The feature pedestrian way should have interest and attractive features along the path. There should be vertical art, seating opportunities, lighting, and plants that provide year-round and visual interest. The feature pedestrian way should be 8 feet wide with landscape borders on each side. Typically, the landscape border should be free of structures, but staff is supporting the applicant's proposal to add elements in the border. The extension will allow for the possible social interactions and add to creating a gateway. Your approval of this project will allow for this deviation. A neighborhood trail is designed to create connections between neighborhoods and land uses. These walkways are typically interconnected with the sidewalk and are adjacent to open spaces. The neighborhood trail for this project does just that. Unlike the other buildings, units 19 through 21 will gain building access from the neighborhood trail. In addition to providing building access, the neighborhood trail will also connect to the proposed open space in the Westridge single-family home project to the west. The neighborhood trail must be 6 feet wide with 4-foot wide borders on each side. Due to the individual unit terraces that are being proposed, this is currently not shown on the plans. Prior to construction, the applicant will need to meet this requirement. The project will also have open space opportunities in the form of a local park, a pea patch, and several small pocket parks like the one between buildings 19 and 20. Before installing in any open space, the proposed design will be reviewed jointly by the Issaquah Highlands Architectural Review Committee and staff of the Development Services Department. Depending on maintenance responsibilities, some elements will be altered or substituted. Staff will try to obtain clarity prior to the next meeting. With housing comes the need for parking. The project is required to provide 2 parking spaces for each unit. This results in 224 stalls. The current proposal is exceeding this requirement and providing 415 stalls, which is 191 more stalls than the required number. 372 stalls will be provided on site. Parking for each lot will be achieved through the use of the garage and/or the driveways. You can see from the image, the larger units are meeting this requirement by utilizing the 2-car garage. The driveway provides 2 additional parking spaces that can be used by guests. The smaller units meet this parking requirement by using the single-car garage and the driveway. Guests will also have the ability to park on the public and character streets. 20 stalls are provided throughout the 2 character streets, and 23 stalls are dispersed between Ellis and 8th Avenue. And please note that the street parking numbers only reflect one side of the street. Additional parking may be available in the future as a result of future development. As previously stated, the Issaquah Highlands has its own architectural review committee. Therefore, architectural styles, materials, and colors were not reviewed for the site development permit. Staff did review the overall streetscape and building placement. The proposal shows the building set back generously to accommodate porches and other elements that extend to the corner of the building. The design feature is desired and prevents building's ends from being exposed. On the image, you will see the building ends are along the street or the trail. It's important that these ends provide additional design elements like porches or extend towards the street to create opportunities for social interaction. And that is the end of the presentation. Do you have any questions?
I think I have lots of questions, but I think I might wait until we see the rest of the presentation.
Okay.
What about you guys?
Definitely. I
Want to wait?
suppose we can wait.
You don't have to.
I'll wait. Well, actually, you know what? You mentioned Block 4 is where the affordable housing is.
Correct.
Yeah, I'll wait for the applicant to talk about that stuff.
I actually do have one question right now. So Block 2, sorry, I'm stealing
Oh,
your
that's
map
okay.
here.
Your own. but
I know.
It's okay.
South of Ellis, there looks like to be 4 buildings that are really, they look like they could have or should have been part of the other development.
Correct.
Why was it broken up like this and not part of the other development?
I believe that they ran out of entitlements.
Is that what it was? Entitlements on that block or on that piece of land?
Right. I mean, we talked about this when the SDP came through before. They just needed the TDRs to be approved so that they had enough
Okay.
entitlement to build that area.
And I don't think I was there for the Westridge property that's being built right now, if I recall.
Yeah, it is.
No, I don't think I was at those hearings, so that's why I don't recall that.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, just curious. Not material for me necessarily, so, okay.
Thanks for my map back.
Yep, you're welcome.
All right.
All right, thank you.
Applicant.
Thanks, Valerie.
No problem.
Who, is it Richard or who's going to speak? David. Thank you, David. Come on up.
Did you, oh, okay.
This is new. Doesn't have crypto like.
Thank you, Valerie. Good evening, members of the commission and members of the public. We appreciate you being here this evening. My name is David Avenel. I'm a development project manager with Polygon Northwest. Before we get going, just want to introduce a few more members of my team here tonight. Nick Abdelnour, you guys can just raise your hands. He works as our Director of Land Acquisition and Entitlement. Richard Rawlings, he is our Manager of Architecture and Planning. And then we also have Gary Scharnbroy with Core Design. He's our consulting engineer on the project. We're excited to be here this evening to present this project to you and are available for any questions as we go along the way here. Here's an overhead view here of where we sit in the Issaquah Highlands. As Valerie indicated before, you know, currently the townhome project down here to the south is being currently built out. It's immediately adjacent to us, separated by Northeast Ellis Drive there. Over here to the east is the parcel that's owned by Shelter Holdings. Their application is currently in with the city and for review. And then the project we talked about the last time we met with you guys is down here, the Westridge Single Family North. The project, you know, will be connected to the Highlands road network through the main public right-of-ways. Valerie mentioned this as well, is Northeast Ellis down here to the south that bisects these two townhome projects. And then also up here to the north is Northeast Federal Drive. Those are both public roads. And then also extending kind of north-south here will be 8th Avenue Northeast, and that extends all the way up to Federal Drive here. To go a little bit further on the circulation of the project here, the yellow, I guess, overall is what we just went over with the public right-of-way. I don't think we need to go through that again. But the green area there is the privately owned alleyways that will serve as access to the homeowners for their garages. It's much like what we had previously at the Brownstone project with those alleyways and how they serve the project or the garages that way. The blue is what Valerie touched on a little bit earlier. Those are the character streets. Those are also privately owned. She touched on it a little bit and gave you some flavor of what those will look like. They line up with the Townhomes South project. So it's kind of a nice transition where you can walk across Northeast Ellis there and keep the walking experience and the same flavor going. Those are, special use streets designed to be integrated spaces with, a vehicle driving area and a pedestrian walking area. It's all, on one plane. The small yellow dashed area over here, that is a neighborhood trail that wraps around the open space here, and it also connects, hopefully, to the future single-family north neighborhood over here. And then last but not least is this pink pedestrian way feature. It's called the feature pedestrian way that we can get into a bit more here. So here's our concept for our vision of this feature pedestrian way. It's designed to be a hard surface promenade for pedestrians connecting to the site east and west. It will span all the way over here on 8th Avenue Northeast and go to the community park. It kind of continues down here. It'll go towards the community park. And ultimately, it helps provide a connection to the proposed High Street Promenade in our single-family plat application. So it's kind of a nice east-west connector to the retail and out to hopefully some views.
David, sorry to interrupt, but what's the grade difference from east to west?
That is a good question. Might have to phone a friend on my engineer here. Say that again?
1.5? Okay, thank you.
I believe it's 20 to 25 feet.
20 to 25 feet, okay.
So this the feature pedestrian way here will be about 8 feet wide of decorative concrete. And then on each side here will be an 8-foot landscape border. Valerie touched on what's the end of some of these buildings. They will actually encroach onto that, so there will be a slight deviation there. I can show you a little bit later on what the architectural intent and what we're thinking in those areas. So along this pedestrian way here, we will have some activity nodes placed along the pathway to provide opportunities to activate the pathway. Places to sit, to relax, have some type of activity happen there. We're still exploring the uses for these areas, but the concept is to provide small coves or focal points off the trail to provide some level of interest when you walk the path.
Is the concept also to have where the promenade, that's what we'll call it, crosses any street, to have it raised, or?
There would be a change in material. I don't think we're planning on raising it necessarily. I could be wrong on that, but it definitely is a change in material. So when you drive, past these areas, your attention is drawn to the surface, that it's very different and a scored concrete pattern to raise your attention.
Because it seems like there's going to be quite a few streets that people are crossing on their way up, so.
Sure.
And are you going to talk a little bit more about the character streets?
I wasn't planning on it. I don't have too much to add of what Valerie had touched on. I mean, they are going to look in flavor very similar to what we have at the Townhome Project South that's being built out right now.
which I've already forgotten about. So.
Okay.
Yeah, we haven't seen completed, et cetera. So I
Sure.
don't remember exactly what that is. So this might be a duplication of information, but
Okay.
are they wide enough to have street parking?
There is street parking on one side of them. There's about 7 feet of parking on one side. There's 10, I believe it's 10 feet of travel lanes on the actual surfacing of the it says decorative concrete kind of surfacing for the roadway. And then on each side, so there's 7 feet of parking on one, and then there's 5-foot sidewalks, as well as some area for site furniture, benches, street lights, bike racks, things of that nature.
And is the parking, is that a cutout or just
There's
line?
little bulb outs for
Okay.
the parallel parking,
Okay.
yes.
And are they meant to look like how do they differ from the major roads that are going through there?
How do they differ? It's meant to be kind of a little bit more of a socially driven street. It's pedestrian focused more than cars. It is, it's not a Wooner per se, but
Right.
it's kind of around the same family. I can show you, if we want to exit this, I can give you a little bit of the packet that you guys had. There's a little bit of a vignette showing the flavor of what that might be.
Yeah, I'm not familiar. I don't recall using the term character street before, so
Oh.
it seems kind of new to me.
And that's a good point, Lucy or Valerie. Is there any other character street? The only thing I can think of is between like Regal and the structured parking that I would consider to be kind of similar to that.
Right.
Is there anything else that is out there?
So
Main Street in Disneyland.
that was our goal. So it's a good question, because throughout Issaquah, Highlands, and Talus, there are Vooners, which are a shared surface. The difference with the character street, which was a standard that was adopted when the Lakeside Development Agreement was approved, is that instead of the cars and pedestrians sharing a single surface, there are these bollards. Can you maybe pull up the drawing with that? There are bollards that sort of and street trees and raised benches and things like Valerie mentioned that define a separate pedestrian zone along the edge, even though it's a single surface. There are some elements which differentiate pedestrian area from vehicular area.
So like there would be a bollard where where the promenade crosses, such that a car isn't going to try to turn up there thinking it's an alley or something?
We would do that. Pretty much, I think anytime something's 6 feet or wider, we would put a bollard in so
Okay.
cars don't
Get confused.
misunderstand.
As far as traffic goes, is it 25 mile an hour residential speed zone, or does it differ because of this having more pedestrian oriented type traffic?
Typically, 25 miles an hour. You can't go much lower. State law won't let you go much lower than that.
They're two-way streets, character streets, or two-way?
Correct.
Yes, they are two-way streets.
All of them.
Here's just I think you guys may be able to see this, but this is kind of showing what I was trying to explain to you, where you have the travel lanes here are 10 feet on each, so 20 feet of asphalt here. On this side, there's about 4.5 feet of site furniture with benches and planters and bike racks and what have you. 5 feet here for a sidewalk. The stairs to the townhome units start here, and then here's your structure. Going to the other side of the street, here's where the parking is, the 7 feet of parallel parking. And then you also have there's some features behind that, streetlights and whatnot. And then there is a 5-foot concrete walk here. And again, then your stairs to the townhome start and the facade of the townhome. So it's a townhomes facing each other on that surface.
And this is sheet P2 in your drawing set.
One more question while we're on character streets. You mentioned privately owned. Is that responsibility of IHCA, or is it city responsibility to maintain roads?
The IHCA.
IHCA?
So character street's new to me as well, and I'm newer. So between the trees, is that where cars would drive?
Between the trees, that is where cars would drive, yes.
Okay. So the pedestrian area is the left of the tree or the right of the tree?
Correct. Over here. And then on this side, you have some site furniture with benches for pedestrians, and then also again, 5 feet of sidewalk.
And given that these are kind of a major, thoroughfare through the neighborhood, traffic calming, is there anything that's put in place so that, as people are using this as intended with pedestrian, features, that it slows traffic a bit?
I think that correct me if I'm wrong, but the plane where it's all in one plane, there's difference in the material of the concrete and the asphalt and whatnot. It's kind of designed to, when you enter that surface, you know that there's certain cues that this is not a normal street. You're supposed to slow down a little bit through here. And when you do cross the feature pedestrian way, there will be material changes and with scored concrete notifying you that this is where people crossed east-west. So I think by nature, that's kind of the design of the roadway to do that.
Also, just having the bulb outs with the street trees in it is gonna make the street feel tighter, along with the elements that David identified.
I guess I'm more worried about the promenade that's going through there. I mean, if it's truly meant to connect people with the shopping center up above, with all that activity, then there might be a lot of people walking that. And, it's a little bit of a concern with any of these streets that are there. And so, Ben talked about a traffic calming. It seems like a raised crosswalk achieves both safety for the pedestrians that are crossing and traffic calming.
So typically I would say yes, but because this street doesn't have curbs, there's not something to raise it from, since it's a single plane.
And put in curbs.
Well, but I think one of the things is that we would want bulb outs where that was crossing, so that you're getting pedestrians out to the travel lane edge so they can have good sight lines.
Okay.
And then there's a special detail that the city has for crosswalks with concrete that has that sort of reflective Durastripe on either side that highlights it, especially at night.
night. Okay.
So there are definitely details that we will incorporate to draw attention to those.
Okay.
You mentioned sightlines. That was the one thing that I took notes on here, because looking at some of the drawings, like on P3, for example, I can't really tell what's on these corners, but if you look at the featured pedestrian route and those character streets, it would be those intersections in particular, actually all of the intersections along the featured pedestrian route, that I'd want to make sure that those sight lines are properly set up at the beginning, so that we don't have, whether it's street furniture or trees or anything else too close, so it feels safe to cross.
Right. So I'm going to look, I'm going to phone a friend.
Excuse me.
So we do we would do sightline evaluation for those crossings. Now, trees are allowed in a sight distance, but you're right, if you get too much density of trees or shrubs, you can have problems, but that would be part of the evaluation we would do with the construction permits.
Yeah, I mean, seeing what we're doing in the rest of the Highlands with backtracking now and reducing a lot of that shrubbery and others around crosswalks and other crossings, I'd hate to have to go and retrofit that later.
Sure.
I agree with Jeff in the sense that, having 3 young kids and knowing, the best I can tell them to go out and not dart across the street, they still, they get excited and they run out. And so when you have, a really tight area, I do like the idea of having something visually appealing like this. It looks nice. I'm just concerned about safety, pedestrian safety.
So I have to ask a question, or a definition. What is a bulb out?
Bulb out.
Bulb out? Can you explain what that is to me?
I mean, I can, but I'd rather the city explain it.
So if you think about where you have on-street parking and where there isn't parking, such as in front of a fire hydrant or in an intersection, you would actually pull the curb out closer to the travel lane and eliminate the parking, just to keep people from parking in places it's not allowed. But additionally, you can do it where you have a crosswalk, so that you are, that people aren't standing back at the outside edge of the parking. They're actually at the edge of the travel lane, so they can see cars and cars can see them before they step out into traffic.
So in this plan, would that be the shape of it, but they would not be raised? So just by having the material differentiation would be the way that you would distinguish between it?
Correct.
Okay, so there's not like a physical way to stop it, but just a visual way?
Well, I imagine that there may be either trees or bollards for the reason that Jim identified, that to keep people from driving on the feature pedestrian way, and also just to mark that as a place that isn't for parking.
Are you familiar with 10th Avenue in the Highlands? I don't know how to explain exactly, just north of like Ben and Jerry's, that neighborhood. I don't know if we have Google Maps we can look at, but we can show that. There's a pretty good example of bulb outs and a pedestrian crossing that leads to the overlook to the west. So maybe we can pull that up at some point. You can see what we're talking about.
But they're intended to be traffic calming devices, or they're intended to buffer?
I think it's, for me, it means multiple things. One is this says it's okay to park in here, but not out there.
Sure.
It gives a place for the pedestrians to step out and be more visible to any traffic.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, to me, that's what it's mostly about. And the third is the traffic calming, because it narrows the street at that point.
And we can include some images in the briefing response memo.
Yeah, so if you look at 10th Avenue, yeah, just go to the north a little bit from there. Keep going, another block or two. Yeah, right there, this is a good, where that red car is. So that's a bulb out here on the, behind the red car. And if you go up actually a little bit further north, there's a pedestrian crossing up here, a little bit further. Right there,
Okay.
another red car illustrating that.
I'm going to shift a little bit, but stay on this topic, which is parking. There's 372, which I know is above what they're asking for. 43 or street, which means 11.5%, basically, if I did the math right, is going to be available outside the driveway or the garage, correct? Is that in line with the rest of the community? It seems low to me.
Yes.
David, were you finished with your presentation?
No, but that's okay.
Sorry.
So these are the other Westridge projects showing parking ratios. So you'll see that all of the Westridge projects are overparked. So,
Depending on how you define that, I wouldn't agree with that necessarily.
Per
The numbers
code.
would- The numbers would show that,
yes.
but the practicality would not.
You know, the concern is if somebody uses their garage for storage, now you're into the driveway, and then they have somebody come over and somebody's in the street, and really, what I'm hearing is there's only 43 available on-street parking spots for the entire deal.
Wish you hadn't opened this can of worms.
Yeah, it's a can of worms.
So I'll say two things, and then we can let this sleeping dog lie. First of all, per code, you're not allowed to use your garage for storage.
Okay.
Not that that's stopped anyone. Second, I don't think we're really intending to support the construction of large storage units, also called garages, by providing lots of extra parking, because the garage is something that people can control, can make available if they feel the need to have more parking within their control. So our goal is trying to hit the sweet spot. We think that Polygon has done a good job of providing additional parking that they are not required to provide, but which seems appropriate to give. So even if people do all the right things and they don't fill up their garage and they park their two cars there, many people often have more than two people over. And so it's, the important thing is to have that shared resource. It's not a required resource, but almost all of our local streets include on-street parking. And part of the point of that is to have that resource that is shared among neighbors.
I want to revisit that in a little bit, because there's a lot more to be said, I think, on that.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, it's
to go
quite
on.
all right. But I don't want to derail it too much further at the moment.
David, sorry.
Oh, no apology
I've
necessary.
got a Valerusi question. That's Valerie and Lucy.
I got it, thank you.
She was faster than me.
What's the standard for the side of the buildings for a pedestrian, walkway like that?
The feature pedestrian, you
Yeah.
want to know what the standard for the trail or for the building
Yeah,
is?
for the trail where it's facing, because it's facing a public facility essentially.
So it has to be 8 feet wide with 8 feet landscape borders on each side. And technically nothing should be in those. The only thing that we would allow are lighting and seating. But in this case, the applicant proposing to extend the porches and maybe add in some art and things like that.
Okay, because the actual buildings themselves also have to have certain character.
Right, and that's what the extension of the
Okay.
porches would do.
Okay, and then lighting, there will be lighting on that trail as well?
There will be lighting, yes.
Okay,
There's a section too, just to give you a visual of what the feature pedestrian way is supposed to look like.
okay. And then one final question there. I think it was mentioned, Valerie, that there's going to be an HOA that takes over these roads, but it's not IHCA? Or is it?
I think, let us, since Sarah isn't here this evening and we aren't in charge of that, let us confirm whether,
They're
So-
privately owned roads, if I can interject just a little bit. They're privately owned roads that we will have our own condominium association set up here that's basically a sub-association of the
Okay.
IHCA. They would be required, in this case, to maintain those.
Okay,
both the hardscape and the landscape?
That's my understanding. It could be
I'm not arguing, I just don't know.
fair.
So in the case of this feature pedestrian way, where would that be an example on the map that I'm looking at in comparison to the character streets?
I can go back to the presentation here in just one second.
Okay, I
So
found it.
it's that pink dotted line there that bisects the site traveling east and west.
Okay, I did actually even have a note pedestrian way, so I got it.
Anything else? We'll keep going?
Keep going.
All right. So as part of the TDR process determined through the Issaquah City Council decision in June of 2017, Polygon will be providing 10 affordable units within the project. They will be distributed evenly throughout the project with the market rate units as well. You can see up here on the screen, these highlighted units are where we're intending to place these affordable units. We've been working closely with the Arch organization on these affordable units. Not sure if you guys are too familiar with Arch, but they're an organization in King County whose purpose is to assist in developing affordable housing programs across different jurisdictions. We will be working closely with them to implement the affordable housing program for this community and any of our other communities in the Highlands.
So this particular map still doesn't show the missing building?
Say that again?
Didn't we say that?
You mean the 111 versus 112?
And I thought one building was missing too.
No, just a unit. We had,
Okay.
to back up a second, I should have explained that at the beginning. When we had submitted this application, the thought of some gyrations between our different projects and to get the numbers correct was that there would be 112 units on this project. After going through the process a bit more, it kind of fleshed out that this was the place to take away one unit here and get it down to 111 units. The area that we're considering, and this is probably not the right map to show you, would be shaving off a unit probably right here. And what that does is this is also kind of a feature pedestrian way for the townhomes south. So it gives you kind of a little bit of a generous entry to that connection point as well. So it just provides some more room, some more breathing space, and a nicer transition into the community. So.
So I have a question. So these affordable housing units, I think I heard that they were TDRs. So where were they being transferred from?
They are not TDRs necessarily. We needed 100 TDR, transferable development rights, to basically build out this community. And part of that agreement was that there was some affordability components that we needed to meet. So there's 49 total that we need to place up in the Highlands. For this project in particular, these are the 10, we're dedicating 10 of them to go to that 49, and these are the 10 that we're.
And so we're going to talk about the other 39 on Block 4 as well?
Not necessarily tonight, because it's a little bit out of the scope of the project,
Okay.
but I mean,
Smaller than
yes, that's where they would be going, to the
Smaller
Block
than
4
3
project.
acres, that won't come to us.
Okay. But it's still considered with the TDRs?
Correct, just not part of this
Okay.
project.
They're
Okay.
still going to have to meet that requirement.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there was a development agreement, a small development agreement to agree on what Polygon had to do to be allowed to have the 100 TDRs, which included transferring the 49 affordable units from further east in Issaquah Highlands. There was a big debate about should it be out in the community where most of the rest of the affordable housing is, or should it be closer to the transit center? The determination was to move it down here, closer to the transit center, and to make it market rate housing on that other property. So there was kind of a overall
I guess it
swap.
makes sense. It's just normally 30% of the project would need to be affordable housing, and that 30% is being transferred over to another, undersized block, if you will, or tract.
So I don't know that we would agree it was undersized, but I think.
Less than 3 acres.
That just means it doesn't come
Yeah,
to us.
that's-
Yeah.
Right.
but it's still part of this that does come to us.
Right, so the development agreement laid out how many units, which ones would be market rate, which ones would be affordable, where they would be located. And of the total, so that's 150, almost 150 units, and that is 30% of
Yeah,
that
okay.
total. And that was, I think, a big part of the discussion. The affordable, the 30% affordable requirement at Issaquah Highlands had already been completed. So when the TDRs came in, the question was, do we have them meet the same standard, a different standard? And that was part of the discussion in terms of approving the development agreement.
Okay.
Okay.
And one thing I would add is ARCH, which David mentioned, a regional coalition for housing. They're kind of like the city's Department of Affordable Housing. So we contract with them to provide that expertise to the city, as do many
But we don't need to
east
worry
side.
about. Yeah,
What?
We don't need to worry about it, essentially.
Right, I mean, they are doing this on our behalf. So they're representing the city in those discussions.
So here is our concept for the community park. This park will be located on a separate tract, which we're calling Tract B. It'll be owned and maintained by the IHCA. Underneath this park is a stormwater vault that's designed to handle the stormwater for the community. The city will own and maintain this vault. We envision this park to have some activities for all ages. We're planning to construct a 10,000 square foot open space lawn where you can do all kinds of activities: football, soccer, frisbee, picnicking, pick your poison. At the northwest corner of the site here, in these little areas, we are planning to include some climbing structures to provide some unique and artistic play features. We think these are some examples of just some images we think could make sense there. But we think they're a little more unique than just a standard play toy that you see up in the Highlands, and it offers, a little bit of an artistic nod and some play opportunities. There will be soft surfacing to protect the fall hazards in these areas as well.
I have a question, sorry. So your artistic elements, do you work with the city on the approval process, or is that entirely your discretion?
It is not entirely our discretion. We work with the city as well as the IHCA and their Architectural Review Committee with the plans, and specifically Sarah Hoy. She was here at the last meeting. She isn't here tonight, but she could speak to that process a little bit more. But they're very in-depth in what we can put on these plans, and ultimately, at the end of the day, she's maintaining them. So her interests are definitely at stake.
Lucy, when I see the size of this open space and I hear that there's a vault underneath it, I think we had the discussion at the last meeting that there was some sort of change to the vault. I'm thinking it's off of Discovery. There was supposed to, didn't we have that discussion last time? And so something got screwed up with that vault. And so I feel like I have to ask the question, even though I have no idea about vaults.
So I think this is what you're talking about. Something, I wouldn't say screwed up, but we thought that we could lid an existing vault to be able to have the road be completely straight. But actually, the vault lid had to remain an open grate, and so the road kind of wows around it.
Yeah.
However, this vault has not been constructed. It will be designed specifically for this location, and so I'm not concerned about that.
When you say vault, you mean precast concrete type vault, basically in place of a retention pond? Is that the idea?
What's drainage like on this when you're putting grass?
There is typically 2 to 4 feet of soil on top of the vault, and so we feel that, for the kinds of things that they're proposing, that there's sufficient dirt.
Yeah, the only thing I worry about something like that, I like that it's there in this process, but I just worry that it gets muddy and nasty and, yeah, not
Exactly.
that's partly IHCA maintaining it, but it has to be designed and constructed properly for that to be the case. And if it does get to that point, because I know some things don't work, I'd want it fixed sooner rather than later, right? And make sure that it's properly installed, right?
So additionally, along the northwest border of the project, we're proposing to add a community pea patch. This area would be owned and maintained by the IHCA. The IHCA, they have a lot of experience through the years with these pea patches, so that they know about the design and functionality, what works best here. And we do plan to involve them closely in the design of the landscape design of this area, along with the whole area, but this particularly. The pea patch would include several rows of planters, just like the photo you're seeing up here and kind of shown down here. It would also have irrigation connection points, so you could run a hose, some seating, shaded areas, et cetera.
I swear I heard Sarah say pea patches weren't in last week.
I'm a big fan of pea patches, but she did say that, or I heard that last weekend, and I'm glad that you asked that, because I'm very curious as to
Yep.
why
I had
that
a
was.
conversation with her earlier this week about that very comment, and she had received a little bit of feedback from, I think part of it was, there's a group outside of, within the Issaquah Highlands that manages these pea patches a little bit more closely. And her interpretation, not to speak entirely for her, but was that this gal didn't want to manage anymore. That is the contrary, actually. So I think it sounds like pea patches are definitely a successful program up there. And particularly, we've received comments from some of the residents in West Highlands Park that there's not any pea patches in this part of the Highlands.
Their
And they have to go
proximity,
all the
yeah.
way up the hill if they want to do something. So there's a scarcity of pea patches in this part of Issaquah Highlands, so.
This would be an amenity to anybody in the area, right? Not
It
just
would
the
be,
community.
yes.
Not
as
just
fa-
this.
If I think
The
the current ones are-
IHCA would own and maintain it, and kind of, yes, to answer your question, they would.
West Highlands Park residents could participate in this.
That's my understanding, yep.
As far as the way I understand it, Highlands Council maintains all of these, garden patches wherever they're at. And, regardless of where you're at in the neighborhood, you can, use
Use
one.
a spot, yeah.
So Valerie and I were talking that earlier that we were going to check in with Sarah and get some clarity, because we had heard that from her as well. And you may have heard in Valerie's presentation that, some things may evolve, and this is mainly the piece that we want to make sure that we don't say this is going to be a pea patch, and then when you see it built, it's a dog park. So if there's going to be changes, this is the one piece that we're unclear about, and we'll try and get clarity before the next meeting.
Great. Now, if you could do us a favor and, by the next meeting, say, if this isn't a pea patch and we don't know what it's going to be, here are the things that it could be, and maybe restrict it to 2 or 3 options or whatever that is, so that we're not going to an open question afterwards.
Sure, fair enough.
Thank you.
Gardens of Versailles.
Right.
So while we have not yet been through an architectural review with the ARC, here's an example of the type of massing that we'd expect to provide for these townhomes. The material and colors have not yet been selected, so disregard that, but we will be working with the ARC to accomplish that. These are designed to the traditional townscape neighborhood standard. We wanted to, you can kind of see up here, we intend to provide these rooftop decks on many of the units, as well with some habitable attic space behind there. So it's kind of a unique and pretty cool space that you can get a nice view from and entertain. Here's another view of the type of massing that we couldn't put on the end of these buildings. Specifically, this is the area that we were talking about earlier, where there's these side patio extensions that are next to the future pedestrian way specifically. So there's kind of a social element between the residents and what they're entertaining and having a glass of wine, and people walking past that on the feature pedestrian way. It also, it adds an interest level to, it doesn't look like a side of a building, so it kind of accomplishes two different things there. It's really meant to be an architectural interesting piece, while helping us meet that condition, and foster a relationship between the public walking by and the homeowner. So to conclude, city staff and Polygon have put a tremendous amount of time and effort, thought into the design and development of this project. We believe we've met all the conditions, and we hope you guys can get on board with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, so now, I still have lots of questions and so forth, but I do want to open up public comment. Is there anything you want to address before we do that? I'm not going to at this point.
Yeah.
You okay waiting? Okay.
I'm good.
All right, so if you're interested in speaking, once again, there is a sign-up sheet right here. I'm going to go ahead and open the public discussion portion here at 7:59, and ask that anybody that would like to speak, again, please sign up. And do we have any names on the list, Valerie? No names on the list. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak? Second call for speakers. And last call for public comment. Well, that was probably the shortest public comment section we've ever had, closing at 8 o'clock, 1 minute.
Connie's not here.
All right, Connie is here. No comment from Connie.
Down there. TDR.
No, sorry, can't take your comment. Okay, well, there we go. Now we're going to go into discussion, folks. We're not making a decision tonight. We will open the public discussion again at the next meeting, which we anticipate will be in early May. But we will be making a decision, or theoretically we'll be making a decision at that meeting if we are satisfied with the information. So at this time, anybody like to bring anything up? I have notes all over the place here.
I'm going to go back to the parking thing, and, part of this is, the garage size space. There's several divisions within the existing Issaquah Highlands that have 400 square foot garages that really don't allow for, family-oriented vehicles, which, let's face it, that's what the community is, to be fit into it. With the addition of the IHCA also requiring that the trash cans be put in place in the garage, that eats into garage space. So now maybe you're just parking one car instead of two in there. Is there any, I guess my question would be, is there a provision to make sure that I can put my trash cans in the garage, I can put two reasonably sized cars in the garage, and yes, I don't want to use it as a storage unit, but even the smallest 400 square foot garage, if there's nothing in it, you put trash cans in there, you try to park two cars, it doesn't work.
So there is a condition that includes the components that need to be in the garage. So it's 2 standard-sized parking spaces, so that's a regulatory thing. There needs to be space for 3 streams for the waste. Bicycle parking, that's a code requirement, and then space for water heaters and those kinds of things if they are located, intended to be located in the garage. So we've tried to identify those elements to make sure that a garage is reasonably sized for the common and appropriate uses, such as those 4 items.
Again, my only concern is, when you start pushing more stuff into the garage and that they're smaller in footprint, because I get it, the garage isn't a huge selling feature to a house. But when you start pushing more stuff into it, you're going to have more cars in the street, more cars in the driveway, that kind of thing, so.
Yeah, I mean, they need to be sized to do their job, which is park cars.
Right.
Yeah. So I too have some parking concerns. My biggest concern, there's 2 things. One is tandem parking. So when you have tandem, if you have 2 people with cars and you have only, I think some of these units, correct me if I'm wrong, have 1 parking garage parking space and 1 driveway space. Is that correct? That would be the 2
Yes, that's
for the
correct.
unit, right? When that's the case, frankly, people, I'll use the term lazy, it's probably not fair, but if 2 people have jobs and they're driving their cars, parking one in front of the other and someone having to move it out to where, and one's in the shower, one's in their robe or whatever when the other one's leaving, it's just not terribly practical, especially if there's not street parking to move that car to. So I worry about that. If that's assuming they're not using it for storage, and while we can't legislate that necessarily, that they don't use it for storage, it becomes a practical matter, and I always try and be practical about these things, so I really worry about that. The other thing is...
Can I say something about the tandem?
Yes.
So there is an actual cap on how much tandem parking you can have in a project.
I read that.
Because there was some concern when the regulations were originally adopted that that we need to, that practically not everyone may do that. And so they are under the cap for the maximum amount of tandem parking that's allowed.
Yeah, what was that?
35 of
35,
102.
thanks. Yeah, I did see that. I made a note right there. 38 units will have tandem parking. Yeah, 34% of required parking is in a tandem configuration. And what's the max it can be?
50.
50%, right. So, and again, the letter of the law, I get it. That's the substantive part we're talking about here. So we can't say we don't approve this because they don't meet that, because they do meet that. I get that. To me, I'm just trying to get to the practical matter here. That in addition to the lack of street parking, which I don't know, I can't tell here when I'm looking, by the way, at P5. So just referencing that, I've got a few questions on here. We've got the parallel stalls on the 2 character streets. No parking in the alleys, correct?
Right.
Okay. And I don't see any parallel parking on the character street on the south side of Ellis.
Oh, no, the character streets, because that's outside.
Oh, I
That's
see.
not part
There
of
is
their scope
parallel
of work.
parking, but it's from the Westridge south.
Right.
Correct.
Okay.
So
And there is-
they have the same configuration
same
where
thing.
one side of the street has parking on the character streets.
Okay. So, okay. So then, is it about the same amount percentage-wise of on-street parking for Westridge South? Again, I wasn't at that hearing, so I don't recall what that was. Okay.
This is essentially the same configuration, massaged into a less uniform
Okay.
parcel.
So then, I mentioned last meeting on the other plat discussion that, you know, when you have, in this particular case, when you have parking on one side of the street, I do worry about people pulling in and facing the opposite direction. I really hope there's some enforcement that goes on around that. So I don't know if we can preclude that from happening in some way, or at least discourage it. But
I understand the police in the city do ticket for that.
not in the Highlands.
Okay.
Yeah. I know 100% that they don't in the Highlands. I had that
So
conversation today.
I do know, because there has been an interest in enforcement, that the IPD was just authorized to hire 3 temporary officers, because, you know, once you hire an officer, there's an entire year that they're at the academy
Yeah.
before they're available to the police force. So they have added 3 police officers with the purpose of increased enforcement,
Okay.
enforcement, as I
To
understand.
Jeff's point, the only time I see that is, they don't typically patrol it, but if somebody calls in and is mad at their neighbor, they'll come and ticket them, so.
Okay, good to know.
So, you know, again, I don't like to add tons of signs or anything, but we need to, we need to think about this stuff when we're building things like this, because, again, people just tend to get lazy and just go, well, there's a spot over there, where am I going to turn around? And I'm just going to pull in over there, which means when they pull out, it's more of a danger both to pedestrians and additional vehicles. So that always concerns me. On this P5, I have a question. These little rectangular things. Lucy, I'll just show it to you here.
Do you want to
Are
look
these-
forward?
Are these planters here? Is that what those are? Okay. Those are planters. All right, thank you. And let's see, line of sight, character street parking, plant. Oh, and I'm just curious, what's the distance of the character street between Ellis and, well, on this one, it says Ellis is at the north and Ellis is at the south. That's obviously not the case. It's
Oh,
Federal
you
on
mean the
north.
character street south of Ellis? So they're the same, designed in the same manner, so.
What's the length, the distance between that, I guess, that alley at the north and Ellis Drive?
Can you
We go
pull up
past
the
9.
one where you did the
Yes.
block length?
Slide up there.
9, 10, 11, and 12, buildings 9, 10, 11, and 12, basically.
There you go.
Oh, okay, there it is, dimensions.
And that's Federal on the north, by the way.
Yeah, I know. It just, this thing says
Yeah.
Ellis. Okay. So what is the 157 and 310? Is that, I'm adding those together to get the entire block length?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's football field and a half, roughly, or more? Okay. What's that?
I always put them in the football field.
Yeah. Yeah, so one of my questions is, and this might be for Richard or somebody involved with the brownstones, is there any data? I know we looked at this when we were looking at Discovery West and East, but is there any data on how many people are using their garages versus their driveways or street parking from the people that live in the brownstones? Do we know that? Tammy, if you want to step
So
back.
while Richard comes up, I will share one thing. Because, you know, under the moratorium, parking was one of the work plan items. And we were evaluating, there's a research for multifamily, so that doesn't help us here, but research for multifamily in King County, looking at how much parking is being provided in multifamily projects versus how much is being used. And I asked them to add the Discovery Heights and Discovery West, Atlas, some other projects they had not done, Issaquah Highlands 5 years or so ago when they did it. And one of the things that I think was interesting from the consultant that we hired is, you know, when you drive past Atlas, for instance, you see the on-street parking is full. And so sometimes people think that means that there's not enough parking on site. But what you find is that people park where it's convenient. So people will park in the on-street parking even if they're not using their garage for storage, and even if their driveway apron is open, simply because they're running in, they like to go in the front door, that's the way they're coming home. So I only say that because there can be a perception that we don't have enough parking, and sometimes it's just human nature about what people perceive to be convenient.
I cannot agree with you more on that, but that actually leads to lack of on-street parking.
Right.
Because you're right, it's not that we don't have enough parking. I mean, I can tell you, my next-door neighbor on my street who just moved out, 3 cars, they have a 2-car garage. 2 of those 3 cars are on the street, 1 on the driveway. Not a single one in the garage. I mean, there are 20 houses on my street, and half of them do the same exact thing, right? So that means that visitor parking is basically non-existent most of the time. And I see that all over the Highlands, and I don't know that we can legislate that, but I just think we've got to. And then when you talk about other neighborhoods, like, I don't know if West Highlands Park has a problem right now with on-street parking. If some of these folks are going to move down there, or now the plat that we looked at last meeting, they start to bleed into other communities. So while it looks fine for this one in a vacuum, it's not necessarily, we talked about this with Discovery and Swedish, right? Everybody was counting the same on-street parking when there's really 2 different projects. And so I just worry about that. And I don't know if there's an answer to it. I just want to know that we're doing everything we can to maximize the amount of on-street parking, because here, I know we have a provision for things like fire hydrants and post office, or mailboxes and utilities and things like that, but I don't see that factored in here, so I don't know if this is going to change or what.
So we absolutely, that big priority for me with staff is to make sure that when we're reviewing site work permits and the hydrants are being located, they're being located in places that don't displace parking. Someone from, the reason that Valerie has the slide that she showed showing parking in various West Highlands Park neighborhoods, could you pull that one up again? Is that someone from West Highlands Park came in to talk to me, and they do have a parking. I don't think you're going to find people from this neighborhood going to West Highlands Park. I think you're going to find people from West Highlands Park coming into these neighborhoods because they have a lower ratio of stalls per unit than these neighborhoods do. So I think that, as a lesson from West Highlands Park, although West Highlands Park meets code, these neighborhoods meet code. These neighborhoods have more parking, and that it is makes a lot more sense for serving the neighborhoods and kind of the human nature piece.
Yeah, I agree. It's probably, we'll go the other direction, but I just think you add all of these together, and all of a sudden you've got this sort of swelling of cars sort of bouncing into other neighborhoods when they can't find it on, or visitors, when they can't find parking near where they're trying to go. So anyway, my request, I guess, is to maximize the on-street parking. I know you've met code. I know I can't ding you on that, but the practical reality of how people use their driveways, how they use their garages, and are semi-self-serving in those decisions, unfortunately affect the reality of our neighborhoods.
So I want to just, I'm not disagreeing with you.
Okay, you can disagree with
But
me.
I might be the rare odd bird here where my garage is actually very wide open. There's not a lot of junk in there, and we park our cars in there, and we, probably unusual, maybe that is.
Talk to my wife.
Sure, I like to get rid of things. So there are people that maybe aren't using cars as much, and our culture could be changing where we're not as car dependent. So I mean, it's probably unusual, it's probably not the norm, but it's something just to be considered and part of the conversation.
No, I agree. I don't see that happening here. I'd like it to happen here, but it's just not happening here. The reality is, with the way the school lines are drawn, people are driving to these schools, the way the lack of transit options.
I think that's probably more the root of the problem that
Yeah.
we'd like to solve, is maybe
Yeah.
give people different options.
Yeah, and weather too, right? So,
And I'll go back to garage space, and I know that we don't control the size of these garages, but that does factor. I mean, for example, the IHC has to create variances for people that have really small garages so they can keep the trash cans inside the garage, per their regulations, but then allows them to keep, it forces them to put a car outside, basically. So design of the garage, for me, is hugely important. If it's on the edge of being able to accept, let's face it, a lot of families up there, an SUV and a sedan, for example, and then also have the trash cans tucked away, that, if it's designed that way, that prevents the variance coming into IHCA saying, okay, you're going to have to keep your recycling trash cans in the garage and forcing a car out into the street.
I think that we have learned over time to review for more things. That's why we wrote the conditions, sort of saying the things that a garage needed to be sized for. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't more things that people may want to use their garage for, but I think the things that we get to have a say in, we tried to identify to make sure that when we're reviewing the building permits, we can actually make sure that those things were taken into account.
and, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, along the data question too, do we know how many adults, or maybe even how many vehicles per house or per unit we're getting at your developments? No? Okay. That'd be interesting to, I don't know if we can find that stuff out, but it'd be kind of interesting because some of the,
Higher than what was expected?
yeah, I don't know. I mean, because code is code now, but, what is that informed by how many cars people are
Well, but
bringing these
also-
days? Because if it is changing one way or the other, we should probably know that.
Also, the
Right, there
code.
probably is a demographic. I would assume that they would be doing demographics on the type of customer that you're trying to attract,
Would
so.
hope. Yeah.
Does Swedish open up their new parking lot during the evening, or do they close it down? Do you know?
I don't. It has gates on it, and
It
I
has
don't
gates
know
and they
whether
never
they're
seem to not
using,
work.
you've never seen them down?
Well, they're down, but I've never seen them not raise. I don't
Oh.
personally use that. There's always parking closer, but I'm just thinking,
I know West Highlands Park, this gentleman who came in and spoke to me at the counter, he said that he knew neighbors or guests of neighbors who were parking in the north part of the northwest parking lot, because there
the one
wasn't.
that's right behind the temporary polygon structure.
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. Okay, yeah, just because I'm,
And I haven't heard, and he didn't mention like they ticket if we do that.
you mentioned that it probably wouldn't be Westridge people that would take up parking spaces down in the Highlands Park. It'd be the reverse. And I'm thinking, did I get those names right?
West Highlands Park
Yeah.
is.
And, but I'm thinking also, the potential that if there is a street vacation, one of the things we talked about was the weather and how it would be an issue for people that were down there. And that's a potential outflow or a place where people could park during bad weather in particular. I mean,
Oh.
it's still walking too, but I'm just thinking,
It's about time.
yeah, I know, once in a while.
So
Okay.
I have one more question. So I thought I heard a comment where the parking that was on either one street or more than one street was on one side, and that there might be considerations in the future that could change?
Correct. On the public streets, on Ellis, which is red, and 8th Avenue, the applicant's proposing to have parking along the street. There's already parking along Ellis on the south side because of Townhomes South project. On the east side of 8th Avenue is the Shelter Holdings project. They may add on-street parking once they come in for their project.
That'd be great, if it makes sense. Quick question on Character Street and, I guess, Character Street and Pedestrian Way. I can't remember, I don't think I saw it in here, but dog waste stations, is that part of the plan? And if it isn't, it definitely should be.
I believe those are managed by IHCA.
They would, I don't know what Polygon would say, but we would look for those certainly near the park and along the feature pedestrian way.
Okay, just want to make sure. I didn't see it anywhere in here, and I know IHCA maintains that, but I don't know in conjunction with the planning, we should probably figure out where those go or how that, I don't know how that process works, but I just wanted to bring that up. Didn't want that to go to waste.
There you go.
Could see that one
Or
coming.
in the pea patch.
Yeah, well, eventually.
Yeah. I could keep going, but I won't. Okay, yeah. All right, I think the rooftop decks, I love it. Keep that up, please keep those.
That's great.
Yeah. What can we expect to see, by the way, are there any other comments at this point?
No.
Okay. What can we expect to see at the next meeting? Anything more that we're going to see with respect to, you said you haven't looked at materials or colors or anything like that. Since we're going to be theoretically, voting on approval or denial of this, are we going to see more of that stuff next meeting?
Hi, Richard Rawlings with Polygon. So short answer would be no. We're trying to represent kind of the scale and mass of the buildings and then address really which was a concern at the prior townhome, how do the ends interact with the public way?
Okay.
And so shortly, you'll be able to actually physically go out and see the execution of that on that first building down at the Townhome South, this sort of patio and roof structure and so forth. Plus, the materials on the side of the building, the articulation. So those are the things that that we can sort of represent and commit to at this point. We are planning on doing the roof decks. The buildings are, I think there might be 1-2 unit building, but they're kind of in that 3, 4, 5, 6, plex variety, very similar to Brownstone and to the townhomes that are being constructed today. And so there's a number of those buildings that are getting framed right now, and so you could physically kind of walk out and get in. And again, the Brownstone, like the plaza, I just was down on it today, that goes down the center of that. It's a little grander than a feature pedestrian way, but it has those same kind of interactions we're trying to achieve on the ends of the buildings. So you get sort of patio, stoop, a public way, planting, seating options, those kinds of things.
I love how the Brownstone pedestrian way looks and acts, and performs.
And that has, I would call feature pedestrian ways, but it does have neighborhood trails that are running perpendicular to that grid of alleys and 10th and so forth. And so when we talked about earlier visibility and so forth, I think it's more on the scale of the plaza interaction with Discovery than the walks that interact, say, with 10th, because those are 5 foot wide, I think, and don't really have, there's not really obvious that those come out, if you will, where this is going to be quite obvious that, there's a gap in the buildings and there'll be a lot of visibility.
I apologize if this is somewhere else, but how similar or different are the Westridge North buildings going to look to the south?
So the 4 that are in the little orphan piece, those will be identical to what's being built in that block.
Okay.
So I think as we move forward, we like the floor plans. We made some changes. The roof deck is new from Brownstone. That was not there. But the basic building we like from a floor plan point of view. But I think we do want to put a different spin on the exterior. We want to have that stand alone, if you will, rather than the 2-block area all the same.
Okay.
So we'll mix up the materials. I mean, we probably won't go all the way back to Brownstone, but we may bring brick back versus the stone panels we're using here. So.
I like to hear that they're not going to be identical
Yes.
to the others.
Yeah, that's not the intent at all, and we're not going to be identical.
Okay. I don't think I have any other questions at this time. I covered everything that I had.
I
How
have
about
no
you guys?
questions.
No? Okay. All right, thank you very much. So I think at this time, just to remind everybody, we will reopen public discussion at the next meeting for this particular site development permit, which will be sometime in early May, and get hopefully additional information on the parks and the P-patch and parking and anything else that came up tonight. Thanks, everybody. Okay, now we go to an Issaquah Highlands update, correct? Is there anything new?
So
The
it's
agenda.
actually urban villages.
Urban Village update.
Oh, I see. So I think it's been 2 years since I did this, which really shocked me. So I'm going to go through each of the urban villages and just talk about some of the projects and things that are happening. As I think you're aware from last time, the development agreement for Issaquah Highlands has been terminated and replaced by regulations, replacement regulations. However, many of the projects you're reviewing still fall under the development agreement, so we are still using it. The little maps on the side, this is sort of the overall sort of central swath of Issaquah, and then the urban village with the location of projects. So you'll see this kind of key on each of the slides just to kind of help orient you. Westridge has a lot of projects going on, so I'm just going to run through these. Many of them you're familiar with. This is where parcel D is. This is 15th coming through. That is going to be a preliminary plat of 10 homes, so that would come to you later this year. And then you would make a recommendation to council.
Can you explain that one real quick? So that's 15th going across,
So this is Falls.
I'm sorry, it's south of the apartment complex.
Yes, so this intersection right here is College, Falls,
okay.
and 15th.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. And then Westridge North is a preliminary plat, which you again would make a recommendation to council. We're talking about Westridge North's SDP. Westridge South Townhomes are under construction. We're reviewing building permits. Block 4, which is the dark blue, is small enough that it is an administrative permit. And then the south, Westridge South was a preliminary plat, which you have approved, and we've done the construction permits and the final plat. So we have a few more building permits, but that's under construction. Shelter. I just included the zoning cap on here for your reference, since it is almost entirely non-residential. They have a preliminary plat in for review, which we anticipate coming to you in the spring this year.
I'm sorry, this might be just a technical thing that may or may not matter, but on page 15 of 102 of this report, I just made a note here that when this talks about in the staff report, the application information, it identifies the shelter holdings property as well as what's on the north and the south and the west. And it says proposed retail. Should that say proposed retail, office, commercial, or does it matter? I just it just sort of popped in my head that it wasn't accurate.
So I think that may be because, so the property that we're talking about is right here. And there has been some discussion from Shelter about having retail uses on the northern portion. So I think that was just recognizing that, but you're
Okay.
right. That isn't part of the plat, and so that would come later.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Grand Ridge Plaza is building out the last of their entitlement. Excuse me, in a 5,000 square foot structure. It's almost, the shell is, I believe, complete. And it's able to be divided into 4 separate uses, but right now they're just doing 2. Orange Theory on the north, which would be where this is, which is a fitness. And then on the south, Habit Burger to ruin your fitness.
From one to the other.
I
Yes,
decided which
exactly.
direction to go, though.
Yeah, eat the burger and then work out and
Yeah.
work out.
There are 2 buildings behind Marshall's, mostly behind Marshall's, blocks 19 and 20. 19 is kind of across the street from that little park. It's a 135-unit apartment building. This is an image from their administrative site development permit. But they have their construction permits in, and we expect them to be under construction later this year. And then the use on Block 20, we have approved an administrative site development permit for City Surf, which many of you have heard about. They're in the process of finalizing various elements, and we assume that we'll get the building permit again this year. And that's the end of Issaquah Highlands, unless you have any questions.
The tree-lined street that we talked about.
I know, I thought about that when I started putting this together and realized by the time I got here, I'd forgotten. So
Street South.
I will include something for
Okay,
you.
Richard mentioned to me on the way out after last meeting that that he thought that there was a disconnect on what we think we want and what might be allowed in terms of the types of trees, that a lot of the stuff that we would want for that sort of look and feel would not be allowed because of the types of trees required to do that. Is that true?
So Valerie, would you make a note that we will provide information in the packet about the trees and their sort of growth characteristics for the next meeting?
Thank
You're
you.
talking about the canopy entrance.
To Westridge
Swedish,
South.
yeah.
Yeah, and I apologize for spacing out. Talus, the development agreement went back to the council at the same time Issaquah Highlands did, March 19th. It was not terminated. It was remanded to the Planning Policy Commission to look at the assigned zoning for Parcel 9. That will happen later this month and then go back to council. So that's what's happening with the development agreement. We assume that's the one last issue to be discussed. Parcels 7 through 9, which was a preliminary plat you reviewed. It's kind of on the very eastern side here of Talus. 7 and 8 had a final plat, which was approved but then appealed a couple of times and then remanded back to the hearing examiner for additional geotechnical studies. Those geotechnical studies are in process of review right now, and we expect the final plat to go back to the hearing examiner again in the spring this year. Parcel 9, they are currently working on stabilizing the site through building a series of 4 walls, starting down at Shangri-La Way and going up towards the reservoir. They are in the process of designing and constructing those walls. Probably it'll take most of this year to do that.
Is it true that, is it 8 that someone had mentioned to me that they had heard that there was a challenge by, I guess it was, they were trying to build, someone wants to build on 8, but they can't until 9 gets figured out. Is that true?
No, they're independent,
Have
but
access and everything? I thought, I was told that they were unable to do that.
no, I think the road goes fairly close. They will have to finish all the site improvements as part of the final plat. And by doing that, they should be able to, but you can't build houses without a final plat.
Right. Okay, so it's not precluding them from building.
9 is not precluding them.
Okay, all right.
Timber Ridge, they had a phase 2. That's these sort of buildings that, that's really hard to read, I'm sorry. But you can see these sort of darker squares are each of the elements that were added in phase 2. Those are all complete. The last piece that they're doing is this little square that's on the corner of Falcon Way and Talus Drive, and that's what you see on this lower part here. It was originally approved as sort of like home occupations where people who lived in Timber Ridge who wanted to continue businesses could have offices down there, or that there would be some other use that would sort of activate that lower part of the building. Never really happened. So LCS, which is the company that builds these, are developing these as sort of four small units that could be for snowbirds or people whose units aren't ready, who are kind of stuck in between. So they will be residential units on that lower portion. Parcel 17B, which is just below Timber Ridge towards SR 900. TriMet has owned that parcel. You approved a office development for 516,000 square feet in 2008, so it's been 10 years. And they have not been able to develop it. They have worked very hard to try and get someone interested. That hasn't happened. So they are currently, the city they wanted to change the use of this parcel to be both office and residential. The city determined that that was a major modification that would have to go to council. The property owner has appealed that, and so we're in the process of processing that appeal. TOD, which you probably don't hear much about. It is, here's the Issaquah Highlands Park and Ride and Regal Cinema. This was formerly part of Issaquah Highlands, was pulled out as a separate development agreement. TOD stands for Transit Oriented Development. This was developed as the YWCA Family Village and Z Home project. That's been all completed a long time ago. So as part of terminating the Issaquah Highlands development agreement, we also terminated this development agreement, even though it had more time. We just wanted to try and complete that process simultaneously. WashDOT TDR, this is, you can, I think, so here's Falls Drive, and there's parcel D that we were talking about. Some of you may remember the SDP that we did for Bellevue College. Again, because Pinecrest and Sunridge are finished building, we didn't terminate the development agreement because we needed to retain the rights for Bellevue College to develop at some point. But what we did is we redrew the boundary to limit the development agreement just to the Bellevue College property. And so essentially the development agreement was terminated for Pinecrest and Sunridge, and now they're governed by the replacement regulations. Raleigh, there hasn't been any activity. The red dot is, excuse me, their hotel, which opened, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago. We have been talking to them about some possible projects. We don't know when and if those are going to happen, but they are thinking about what their next project's going to be. But no particular activity other than just tenant improvements and small remodels. Lakeside, now that we have completed Issaquah Terrace, which was also Polygon on the eastern side of Lakeside, we don't really anticipate anything happening here for 15 or 20 years as they finish mining it out. But the development agreement is in place, and this is the area of the Westridge North single-family plat that we're all talking about.
Remind me when, it was a 30-year agreement. When did we actually sign that? Complete that?
I think it's 2012 or 2013, so they've got some time. Yeah. And, you know, there are some parcels, such as the one at this corner or at this corner, that are pretty close to final grade. So if they decided to develop one of those elements, they probably could. I don't think they've, I think they're kind of shelving things and just proceeding with the mining and regrading work that the development agreement anticipated. Swedish, no activity. They have a new, actually, both Bellevue College has a new president, so we're just starting conversations to educate them on the property and the opportunities associated with that. Same with Issaquah Swedish, there is a new CEO. We are interested in talking with them because that temporary parking lot had certain time limits on how long it could be there without certain actions taking place, and so we periodically remind them of that.
So the Bellevue property hasn't been tabled completely?
You know, we went through, there was the president and the interim president under which all the work we did with the commission took place. Then there was a new president. He was there for maybe 4 or 5 years. He was not interested in developing the property. Now he's gone.
Oh, they have a brand new?
And they have a brand-new one within like the last 6 months, maybe. And so that, we just have not had that opportunity to really hash out what they want to do with that property.
And I had heard that ISD isn't really interested in that because of the elevations or something like that.
I know that there was some discussion with them, but I have not heard one way or the other that it is, but I haven't heard them talking about it lately, but I don't know why.
But it's owned by Bellevue College.
Yes.
Yeah.
But ISD is looking, and they thought they had a site that's now up in the air,
Up on the ridge.
up on the ridge. Yeah, well, historic.
Well,
status.
you know, land is challenged. Big
Yeah.
10, 20, 40-acre sites in this, you know, city and Sammamish are very hard to come by.
Yeah.
So they've been looking at everything and trying to figure, I mean, they've talked to Shelter, they've talked to TriMet about parcel 17B, they're looking at City Church, they're looking at the hilltop next to Westridge South, they're looking at lots of different parcels. I think that's my last one. Yep.
Yeah, and I don't know, for those of you that aren't aware, there are some, if you don't mind me sharing some information, because I've been involved in sort of this neighborhood traffic and, you know, pedestrian stuff. In fact, I think we have a meeting this week. But there's some new, was it yesterday? Yesterday, I was at Starbucks. I saw 3 cars in 15 minutes turn down the wrong direction. So I did a walkthrough with a bunch,
Kurt Seaman, wasn't it?
with John.
Oh, John.
Yeah.
Well, yes.
Yeah, and a couple other people, and I mean, Nina's very familiar with this too, but we are starting to see already that they're, for crossings, they're trimming and changing out some of the plantings so that it's much more safe. We're going to see new signs go in, we're going to see flags for crossing areas, but we're going to see, hopefully, there'll be some calming and some changes around the merge area near the firehouse. The no right turn on red, there are 2 very specific dangerous areas that are going to get addressed, and a few other things. So I'm happy to see the time there, and I've also been spending some time with the police department talking about enforcement. And while I'm not a fan of giving people tickets or towing their cars, the broken windows theory is in full effect here, where we haven't done anything to curb bad parking or behavior that everyone knows that they can do whatever they want and with no consequences, so that's got to change. Okay, a little update there. All right, anything else? Anything else? Any other new business or announcements?
Nope.
Okay, so our next meeting is currently scheduled for April 17th, correct?
Yes.
That's still on the docket?
Yeah,
so-
we're working on feverishly working on the briefing response memo.
Okay, and that will be the continuation of the plat?
Yes.
Okay. All right, well then at this time, I'm going to go ahead and close the meeting. Yay, on
Oh,
time.
can I do one thing?
You may.
I just want to introduce Jean Lynn. She's our, since you're slowly but surely meeting everyone in the new team, Jean Lynn is our new senior planner
Okay.
in development services, and she will likely be bringing a plat or some of the other big permits forward to you.
Okay, well, welcome. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Gene.
All right.
Now I'm done.
All right, now we're done. 8:45, we'll go ahead and close this meeting. Thanks very much.
We're done.